people who asked us to. Okay. I'm Heather Brown. I work with the State Board of Education through ISU, and this also helping me is...
Hi, I'm Janine Shepard. So same position, but in the southern part of the state.
Since that's how we're introducing everybody. We are trying to create a network of people so that we can kind of talk about different issues that come up in classrooms, or concerns that you have, or victories that you have. We're just trying to create a network for people to be able to communicate with each other, trying to create a community. So one of the things that I don't know if you all have read or went to NCTM or have seen the NCTM Catalyzing Change. They talk about one of the things that they really want to look for is trying to recreate the joy and wonder of mathematics. And so that's kind of what our overarching goal is for this. So today, our goal today was to talk about creating engaging classrooms. I think we've all kind of had an opportunity to informally introduce ourselves. We are going to do breakouts a little later. We are breaking you out based on elementary school, middle school, and high school. If you gave us more than one of those, we kind of did it based on rooms that had fewer people, and we put you in one. If you really have a preference, like, oh, I put K-8, but I'd really rather be in elementary, if you send a direct chat to Janine can put you in whichever room you want to do. Otherwise, you'll default to, truthfully, whichever one was smaller of the grade bands that you said. If you haven't found your chat window, if you kind of hover over your screen, at the bottom, you can see there's a button that says chat. We'll be posting some things in there, and the very first thing I'm going to post in there, and I will actually repost it because we found out that if you post it and then somebody joins, they can't see it. But the very first thing I posted in there is our Math Teachers in Actions forum. So you can go on to see ILMathCom should load. I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see it. And hopefully everybody got smaller there. So if you click on the link in the chat window, you'll get the Illinois Virtual Math Community. This has our announcement for this week, our announcement for next week, where we're really trying to talk about how to keep students actively engaged all the way through May. And then at the bottom here, we have a forum for you guys to join in. So one is, as we hear people sharing resources, we'll be putting them on this resources links. Or if you have comments that you want to share, or questions like, oh, somebody said this, can you tell me where it was? This is a great place for you to do that. And then we have another forum here for future topics. So if there's something you would like to, hey, I would love to have a conversation with people about this, just let us know, and then we will add it in there. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead, while I'm sharing my screen, go ahead and talk about just a couple other things, since you are a captive audience. And one of the things we have is our listserv. Probably most of you got this from that. We have a lot of people on that. I will put that as a link in the forum as well. If you are not currently on them, we send them, we are on the mission to send them once a week. You can also follow our Classrooms in Action page on Twitter, or our Math Classrooms in Action page on Facebook, which I will also put in there. So I'm going to stop sharing. So I will go ahead and say then we invited 3 people to come and kind of talk about how they're creating engaging classrooms. But our goal is really for this to be open discussion. So we are going to start by having Rebecca. Are you willing to kind of talk through, introduce yourself, tell them where you're from and what you do, and then give us kind of just a couple ideas for how to do that?
Hi, I am Rebecca Stowell. I am from I work in Northbrook, School District 28, and I live up in Grays Lake, so I am a fan of the Northerners. So I teach, I do math intervention, but I previously taught mostly first grade, and also have done second grade. So right now I work with kiddos K-5 math intervention. One of the things that we do in my intervention groups, but also when I was in the classroom, was we kind of coined this phrase, savor the math, and talking about how like math is in itself this really delicious thing that we can enjoy, and we don't have to rush through it to find an answer, but we can sit and enjoy it for so many different reasons in different ways. And one of the ways I try and get kids to savor it is by eliminating the questions that often go along with problems that are available to us. So, you're always getting story problems, and then there's the dreaded question that we all just want to answer immediately. And instead of answering that immediately, let's just stop and talk about all the good things that we can think about and already mathematically come to our brain when we savor the information that we've been presented with. So that's one of the big things that I really like to do.
So kind of taking away some of the scaffolding, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be scaffolded, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be told what to figure out with math, because
345 in rooms 1500 and 1502. Extended detention will start promptly at 345 in rooms 1500.
That is a great point that was just brought up about detention. I would love to take this opportunity to, if you can, mute yourself. If you click on, again, if you hover over, you should be able to see your microphone and click mute. Once we're in the smaller groups, it's not as big a deal, but still it's good practice to just kind of keep yourself on mute when you're not talking. For people who do it all the time, we kind of are used to constantly clicking on and off. But thank you, Rebecca. Sorry, finish your sentence.
Oh, so basically just that question creates a need to answer opposed to a need to just be mathematical and have discourse around the math. So sometimes you could compare something when they're asking what it is altogether. So, but that math gets missed because we go straight to, they asked me a question about altogether, and so there's so many other layers to when math is presented when it's modeled in real world context. There's all this different math that you could really do, but we get so rushed to the question that discourse and conversations get missed. Joy of it gets missed. And so letting kids play around and think about it mathematically before going straight into it is kind of where those were my first initial thoughts.
Great. Thank you. All right. So we also asked Kathy Felt if you can kind of give us a middle school perspective of just like one idea that you would like to share with the full group, and introduce yourself as well first.
Yep. So I'm Kathy Felt. I teach 8th grade math in Sherrard, Illinois, which is, if you drove out I-80 and went just a little teeny bit south, almost to the Iowa border. So I teach in a rural school district, but I've also been a math coach in an urban district. I was just a math coach a couple years ago and opted to come back into the classroom because that's where my heart is, and that's where my soul sings, in the classroom. So I teach 6th through 8th grade. So that's a very interesting age to teach. They're very social. They're very lively, shall we say. And so I've decided to capture that and run with that full force. I teach very differently now than I did back in the day when I first started teaching, and I've sort of embraced the math revolution that is going on right now in terms of math instruction. I have an open classroom. We do all of our work in groups, some in individual, of course, as it gets to assessment and that kind of thing, but for the most part, we're completely in groups. If I had to offer one thing, well, I should say too, we're one-to-one district, but as a one-to-one classroom, I would say that usually we only use half of our computers. So even though the kids all have computers, I have opted to go with, they share so that they have that discourse. My passion is to make sure that every single student is talking every single day in my classroom about math. And so as such, I do a lot of tasks, low floor tasks, so that everybody can come in on every single discussion. And I think a good example of the low floor activities might be which one doesn't belong. So if you're not familiar with which one doesn't belong activities, check out wodb.ca, and you will come up with all kinds of activity, or all kinds of it. They're usually, well, they always are. They're 4, in fact, I do have an example of what they are. They're 4 squares.
Oh, you're going to show one. Okay.
There's one right there. I do have it on a PowerPoint, but there's one right there, and you just put it up, and I give my students 1 minute of individual think time, and I say, which one doesn't belong? And of course, looking at these, anyone can realize, well, I mean, I'll get some that will say, talk about low floor, they'll say, well, the 9 doesn't belong because it's only one digit or whatever. Then someone will say the 16 because it's the only even number or whatever. There's all kinds of things. There's really not a wrong answer. So it gets so many kids involved. But if you listen to what I just said, I think it's the 9 because. And so they're constantly justifying and sharing their reasoning. And because it's low floor, everybody can come in with an idea. And what's really cool about this particular website is that is everything from numbers to shapes to graphs to whatever your subject is, from the littles in the elementary school to high level math in high school. So that's a really good suggestion to do there. The other one thing, I know I'm only supposed to say one, but I do want to say what I think sets up my classroom is my first week of school, every single school year. So as we're starting to end one year, where our eyes are always focused on next year. But I have to say the other thing that I do that I will never not do, or I will always do in the future for the rest of my career, is I don't jump into the curriculum the first week. I take a week, and what I've been doing lately is using on uCubed, ucube.org, which is Dr. Jo Bowler's site that she has done. She has a week of inspirational math. And I've been doing this now for 3 years. She has 3 years of weeks up there, 3 weeks of this to do. And they're highly engaging tasks. Again, low floor, so almost every student can enter the task at any place. And what I use it for is they're fun, they're engaging, you learn a lot of good things about math. It gets me to know my students because I don't know most of them when they come in. So I get a real good idea. I can see who works well together. But the kids we're not jumping into the curriculum. They're having fun. They're experiencing success. They're feeling really good about things. I'm learning a lot. They're learning a lot. We're having fun. And it sets up my rules and procedures in the classroom without anyone really knowing it. So we learn that I value talking, but appropriate talking. We learn routines. We learn all of that in that first week. And it just sets a tone for the whole year, which is really great.
Thanks, Kathy. And 2 things I'm going to say here before we go on to Jeff is, one, I am posting these, the different websites that she said, I posted in the forum so that if people want to see them, they can. It's also, I put them in the chat window real quick. And secondly, what I'm going to say is that we asked a couple people to talk just because we thought that they were good at having the joy and wonder of mathematics and considering about it. But we are not endorsing, we as State Board of Education and ISU are not endorsing any of the products any more than, I will say, the uCubed we do actually endorse. We tell people to use that because it's all free material. But if people are giving ideas, keep it in mind that they're speaking from their own. Rebecca, do you want to share what you just said real quick? Are you still there? Rebecca?
Yes, sorry. I was going to grab my book, so I didn't want people to see me moving around. Yeah, what Kathy was just saying, she also came out with 2 books. So far, there's a 4th grade book and a 5th grade book called Mindset Mathematics for elementary kids, and it's based on her week of inspirational math with low floor and high ceiling tasks. And so it has all of the big ideas that kids are trying to learn in the Common Core for those grade levels, and then it's really supposed to do all those things that Kathy was just talking about and really engage kids in discourse and problem solving and joy and wonder of math. So I was going to type in the title of the books next so you guys can see it, the full title.
Hey, look at that. I was talking on mute. The last person, thank you for that, Rebecca. The last person I would like to introduce is Jeff Harding. Jeff, if you can just, when you unmute, if you can kind of introduce yourself and then talk about a high school idea for us.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm really excited to be a part of this. I'm sorry I got joined you all late. I'm actually up in Green Lake, Wisconsin right now at a math seminar. And we were sitting at a workshop and I saw Heather's text come across. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 3:30 already. So I'm excited to be a part of this. So it's really interesting, Kathy, listening to some of the things that you talk about, because I spend at least 5 days, sometimes more, but I don't touch math at all. I know I love the things that UCube does, but we do a bunch of stuff that is just interactive things that's not necessarily math related. Like some of the things that we've done in that first week. We've built towers made out of straws, and we built boats that were made out of index cards and cardboard, and then went out onto our quad with 5 different classes, and the idea was to see who could float with the most pennies in it, right? We've done these kinds of things to get the idea of trying to build this camaraderie and to build this teamwork and to build this working together kind of idea. And one of the things I like about it right away is it also, although the kids hate it, right, is it builds this idea of failure being okay, right? Even though we do some of these really cool projects right away, inevitably we'll get some kids who don't do a very good job. So I think it does set up this idea that we're trying to make it important to understand that not everyone's going to be able to step out immediately and do something that's fantastic. And the funny part about that is I think the kids that typically build some of the worst stuff and do some of the worst projects are typically those kids who are our highest achieving kids, right? Who don't necessarily understand some of the failure. I've also found that it's given some of our kids that maybe don't have some of the successes, it gives them a few days to feel a part of the class. It gives them a few days to feel like they're having some success. There's a place where that they can jump in and actually be successful. And so it kind of sets the tone, I think, very much so for our first days when we actually start getting working on math. Now, like some of you have talked about too, my class operates exclusively in groups. We don't sit anywhere. We're always in groups of 4. We sit that way all the time. And I think, I got to say, I think one of the interesting things that we really tried to work on in our class, I think it's important that every kid has a voice. That's really important. And you guys were talking about the issue of making sure you hear from everyone all the time. But I got to say, one thing that I struggled with a lot is not every kid wants to have their voice heard out loud, right? And you've all experienced this, right? You stand in front of your class and you ask a question and the crickets chirp and nobody answers. But it's really interesting that as soon as I say that, I'm like, all right, turn to your group and ask the same question to your group. Instantly, my room is filled with buzz. And it's interesting to watch how when you do that, virtually every kid in the classroom will have something to offer. And so I think for me, it's been really exciting to watch how to give some kids opportunity to have voice that have never had it before, because the only place they could do it was in the global setting, and that's just totally uncomfortable for the kids. And the second thing, I've watched some kids who never would speak in front of the class, that as time wears on, right, you go and you sneak in and eavesdrop on the groups. And I've got little Johnny over here who never wants to offer anything. I'm like, wow, that was a great thing I just heard you say. And then, Johnny, can you share that with everyone? I'd love everyone to hear what you just said. And it takes the opportunity to take some of these kids and build them up in ways that they've never been built up before. And I think I just have found that really powerful to help encourage kids to be doing that. Now, I'll say that I'm still kind of an infant, in terms of doing some of the group work, and it's really Heather's fault. So I don't have anybody to blame but you, right? So I wasn't doing a lot of that stuff until Heather taught in my classroom one year, and I sat and watched some of the stuff that was going on. So I'm still really in that infant stage of trying to encourage kids to work together. Although I think it's come a long way.
Awesome. So we're going to break up now so that people can kind of have more small group conversations. So we're going to break up. Janine has us split into elementary, middle, and high school. And so then we can continue the conversation. So this is really an opportunity. One of each of our invited guests will be in each room, so you can kind of ask them questions. I think a lot of the resources that they mentioned, it kind of sounds like they know each other's resources, and Janine and I will also be in some of the rooms so that we can kind of help. If people have questions, they can ask questions. But also if you have suggestions or ideas or other ways that we can do this, feel free to say that. So I think we're going to go over for about 20 minutes. Does that sound about right, Janine? And then we'll come back. We'll come back as a full group. And if you have something you want to share with a full group, and then we'll also kind of talk about what our next steps are. So Janine's going to click us over and it'll be magical. You're on mute.
Sorry. So you guys don't have to do anything. I'm just going to click this button and you will wake up in a different room. Or not. I was wrong.
Hi.
Hi. How are you guys?
So how do we want to get this going?
Elementary room. So just sharing out, we can talk about some of the ideas that were shared, and then this is just an opportunity for everybody to have a voice too. So just kind of like what Jeff was saying, that when you're asked to share your ideas with the whole class, we a lot of times get crickets from our students. But when we put them into groups, then all of a sudden we have these really rich discussions that we can then go back and share to the whole group. So we're just going to spend 20 minutes here together as a small group and then go back to the whole group and share some of our fantastic ideas out. So we haven't gotten a chance to hear from Lacey and Jenny and, oh goodness, Haas. Kimberly? Is it Kimberly Haas? Kimberly's mic doesn't work, but your chat window, I think your chat will work. I'm not sure how that works. When we're in the breakout, it might share with everybody.
When I go to my chat, it gives me Lacey, you, Kay Haas, and Jenny on the side as like I can choose you as individuals.
Nice.
But I can't choose you as a group.
Oh, you can't choose us as a group. All right, so how about Kimberly, if you want to, you can text me and I can speak for you or anybody else in the group. So just so that you have a voice. We will be your voice. But what do you guys do to create that culture and climate that you need in your math classroom so that you can have this rich discourse?
I'm happy to keep talking if other people don't want to talk.
Okay, it does say everyone. I see you, Kay. Kimberly, that is chatting with everybody in the, that's chatting with everybody else too, which is fine. That doesn't hurt anything, but we can see it. So we know that that's where you're going to talk. So do you guys all intentionally like set time aside just establishing a safe place in your classroom where everybody can share and make public mistakes? Or what do you do? How intentional are you about stuff like that? Or do you just kind of weave it in?
Well, I think like in my room, in intervention, it's super important to make kids feel comfortable because they're already feeling most of the time uncomfortable about where they're at. So one of the things I do is I establish a set of rules with my kids, and the rules I establish I have posted like on a bulletin board, and I say, what's your mindset? And we regularly will review what their mindset was when we start, what their mindset is at the very end. I call them my rules. So I have this board and they're like these little thought bubbles. And so I got these from watching a video with Joe Bowler presenting about math and how everyone should think about math. And so these were the rules. I can always improve. Mistakes grow my brain, which I think is the most important one. And so I get really excited when kids are about to make a mistake, and I try and celebrate that and say to them, like, oh my gosh, your brain's about to grow. This is going to be so awesome. Mm-hmm. I'm in a safe elementary space, so you guys all get my quirkiness.
Right.
And then we also
I did the same thing, and I was a middle school teacher. So they thought I was crazy, but it's okay. It's all right. Because they knew if I was acting crazy, then they weren't afraid to be a little crazy.
Exactly. I tell them believing in yourself is so important, that everyone can learn math, and then they promptly tell me that babies cannot learn math, and then I promptly tell them that I have a baby who knows about more and no, and those are math. And they believe me, and it's true. I also tell them speed is not important and math is visual. And then we added a few on our own based on things that I see. So savoring the math is one of the things we added on our own, just to say, like, math is this great thing to love. Math does not need to be perfect. So even though mistakes grow your brain, it can be messy along the way. And a lot of my kids want to know how to do everything, right? How do I do it? And I say, why are we doing it this way? And I make them distinguish not just a path on how to solve a problem, but why it makes sense. And I feel like when we keep coming back to those rules and that language, they feel more confident in attempting things and trying things and discussing their thinking. So that's my verbal vomit.
That was some good stuff. Jenny has some stuff to share. Jenny, I'm assuming your mic doesn't work either. So I'll share what you said. So she said that she tries to start with a number talk to get everyone to communicate with one another. This way everyone starts feeling comfortable. Definitely number talks. How many of you do number talks in your classrooms?
I do.
Yeah. They're wonderful. And they're simple. They're easy to prep. They don't take a whole lot of instructional time. They're just simple, easy, great ways to engage your students in discourse, right? So Jenny's right. Like, that is a great way to establish that climate and culture. It's a great way to celebrate mistakes too, right? We can celebrate mistakes during number talks and really help our students become comfortable. And you guys as elementary teachers have the most important role in that, right? If we can make our students comfortable with this in elementary school, it will definitely help them be better math students later on. I also like to explain to them that I love mistakes and figuring out where we went wrong with our mistakes. I love that. Kimberly says, I was in a workshop earlier this year in which they said while kids make mistakes, their brains fire more than kids who know the skill. I keep reading material about number talks, mental math, and WODB type things, but have not jumped to what I think of as doing that, right? Yeah, it's a huge mind shift in our classroom, right? That is a huge shift in our instructional practices. So it's definitely something that can be a little uncomfortable for us in the beginning, right? As we start to, Kimberly, what grade are you? I can look up, hold on, Haas, where are you? Kindergarten. Okay, yeah. So I thought you were kindergarten. So that's definitely, sorry about the random language and keep up to others saying also. You're fine. You're doing a great job. Anyway, sorry, I am doing a horrible job of reading and then finding information and then sharing all that out without sounding like I'm schizophrenic. So I apologize. Anyway, very, all very good points.
Yeah, I just linked in the video that I watched where Jo Bowler and her grad students talk about the different mindsets that boost your mathematical thinking and feel goodness. Boosting messages. That's what she said.
Watch her all day. She's very entertaining.
She's got a nice voice too.
Mm-hmm.
That British accent.
Right. All right, let's see. What else can we talk about? What do you guys do to address equity in your classroom? So whether we're talking about different ability levels or if we're looking at different cultural backgrounds, how intentional are you in those areas?
I mean, I definitely, when thinking about abilities, will release students to do independent work or guided work in different ways. So based on what I'm observing from them, I try to come up with as many low floor, high ceiling, like things that make sense for them so that they can have a launching point, an entry point, but also can see how far the math can go, right? When they go further with it, if someone else takes it further.
So I'm a special ed teacher, so I have the benefit of having smaller numbers. So before we start a unit, we'll take like a pretest or, just some kind of formative assessment. And I have an aide, so we'll split the kids into groups based on that. And then, so, right now I'm doing multiplication, so the kids who already know their math facts and can remember them are doing multi-digit multiplication. And then I have another group that's still trying to get the basic math facts. And then within those groups, there's all different ways to solve a problem. Like they can do the area model, they can do the standard algorithm, they can do a box method, they can do expanded notation. So within that, each kid picks whichever method they want to use. So they'll all be solving the same problem, just completely different.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and just encouraging the use of the different strategies is so important.
Right.
Yeah, so my daughter was in first grade, or she's in second grade now. Last year when she was in first grade, they were doing doubles plus or minus one, that strategy. And they use Go Math, which I'm not dogging, it's fine. But it is very rigid, and like it's telling you you're using this strategy and you're going to do it for 2 weeks, and then you're going to move on to the next strategy, even though you're looking at the same concepts.
Right.
So it really pigeonholes them into using a specific strategy to answer these problems for a certain amount of time, and then assessing them on the strategy and not the conceptual understanding. Anyway, so she was sitting at the kitchen table, and the worksheet was like 7 plus 8. And she could say, I already know that that's 15 because 14 plus 1 is 15. But the worksheet wanted her to write 7 plus 7 plus 1.
Yeah.
And she had compressed that idea already. Like she had compressed it. And the idea of having to like unpack that to make 7 plus 7 plus 1, she cried for an hour. I'm like, can you just, relax, just do what it asks you to do. Like, write it down the way you want to write it, and then we'll go back and we'll fix that piece, and it'll be fine. We'll write down the double stacked. Anyway, it was just, that's one place where the publisher's interpretation of the Common Core, or what the Common Core was getting at, was a little misinterpreted, right? Like, misused.
Well, I find that in our curriculum too, we use Math in Focus, and it teaches them strategy after strategy after strategy for different skills, and then the kids in their practice are forced to fill in the blank like responses with things like you were just describing, and it's so frustrating for certain kids who are like, I have a strategy that makes sense for me, this one doesn't make sense for me, or why do I have to repeat this strategy over and over again because I already understand it more in a more sophisticated way, but then they're still asked to do it. And it confuses the teachers as well, because I find a lot of the classroom teachers are like, well, they have to do that. They have to be able to do it that way, because that's what the worksheet is. So one of the things that we've tried to talk about in our district is hinge points, like which question really hinges on you knowing whether or not the kids can do the work and understand the task and the concept. So that's been helpful in trying to free teachers from having to assign so much or do so much, have kids do so much repetitive work that doesn't really build on what they understand.
Yeah, and what I've noticed too is some teachers are wanting to skip those strategies that don't make sense to them, or that their kids don't necessarily generally like to use. So they skip those strategies. I'm like, sometimes those strategies are important. Hold on, I just had I'm just going to assign them to elementary. We're going to have a new person join us in just a second. Sorry, squirrels everywhere. Ferris, Patricia Ferris. Ooh, I randomly put you in the right breakout room. If you can hear me, that's wonderful. Welcome. And if you have a microphone, you can. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Great.
Welcome. So we were just talking about how sometimes curriculums will, publishers will encourage students to use a specific strategy for like 2 weeks, an extended amount of time, and then assess them on it, and how that can sometimes be harmful to students, like forcing them to use something that they aren't comfortable using. And then how some teachers aren't comfortable using certain strategies because they don't like it or they don't feel like their students like it. But then sometimes those strategies like using rectangular arrays for multiplication, sometimes that is important because it's going to be built upon later on in a later grade, and they needed that exposure to really help them understand it later on. So it's that fine balance of exposing students to all of this mathematics and the different ways to do it and understanding the connections there without taking away their creativity, right? And their voice in the mathematics. Jenny had 2 things to share. Jenny was talking about what does everyone do for learning basic facts? So she says that her district expects them to use extra math with their kids. But she's been using reflex math, but she won't be able to use it next year. So does anybody have anything to share with that?
I'm not familiar with either one of those programs or resources.
I'm familiar with extra math, and I'm also not a fan of it because what it does is there are parts of it that are great or good where they are practicing their facts. It's very rote. It's timed, which is what I don't like. So you have 6 seconds to answer the question before it spouts the next answer to you. You don't have a way to figure out the fact. It's like you know the fact in the time frame or you don't know the fact in the time frame. But the one thing that it does do is then if the kid doesn't know it in the time frame, it fills it in. So at least the kid's seeing the fact and seeing it accurately. But for the most part, it's just rote practice, making them feel pressured. It's time. I've heard good things about reflex, but I don't know anything about it.
I found one of my favorite ways to really reinforce those math facts and establish that fluency that we want, the procedural fluency. First of all, I think the number one way, if they have a good conceptual understanding, a deep conceptual understanding, then the fluency generally follows. But then my backup plan is games. If you can motivate them to master the skill so that they can be better at a game, more competitive in a game, whether that's partners with cards and dice, or if it's a computer game, there's all different ways that you can use games in your classroom. But I think that's one of my favorite ways to practice facts. Skill and drill isn't necessarily a good use of time, right? But I completely hear what Jenny's saying here about making sure that they have their basic math facts. That's one of the biggest complaints that we hear from middle school teachers is that they come to middle school without knowing their basic math facts, right? That's my suggestion. Anybody else have anything?
I'm just typing in here the title of a book that has a bunch of games, like you were saying.
Yeah.
That it's called Mastering the Basic Math Facts. I'm going to type in the title and put it in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you. We don't have a certain practice in kindergarten for the math facts, but we have focused a lot on number bonds and subitizing to know the fact families. I love that. Yeah, I mean, because again, that's deeper conceptual understanding, and through that deeper conceptual understanding, you're going to lead to fact fluency there for especially addition and subtraction, right? And then Jenny also shared that she likes to pre-test. That was from Kimberly, by the way. Did I say that? I want to make sure that I'm giving credit where credit is due. Is So Jenny said, I like to pre-test and then group according to the skills the kids need. If a student doesn't need any of the skills, he or she gets an extension activity from the chapter while the rest of us are working through the skills we need. My math is what we use, and it does the same thing. I just let the kids use whatever strategy works for them. Yeah. So it's breaking the rules, right? We have to know when to break the rules that have been set by our curriculums, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we need to get a little creative. Creative insubordination. That's my supervisor might be on the call right now. That's the mysterious caller. I hope she didn't hear that. It's a 1 minute warning I'm sending out. Did I talk over somebody? What were you saying?
I said it in the name of math. It's okay to have
sure.
a little. And now I don't even remember what you said. It was so funny.
The creative insubordination.
Yes, creative insubordination.
I also say a lot of times, like when we're talking about teaching through problem solving and helping students like get to a certain skill, that we have to be master manipulators. Like you might want to do this by skip counting, but I am going to manipulate you into doing this through multiplication. All right, let's head back. Do you think that 1 minute? I gave us the 1 minute warning. I think I can go ahead. We're going to leave the breakout rooms and go back to the main. Maybe. I'm closing the rooms. This is happening.
Okay.
All right. We made it.
Yeah. Jenny made it.
Patricia, where are you from?
Bourbonnais, Illinois.
Where's that?
It's about an hour south of Chicago.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's where the Chicago Bears have their practice camp every summer for the last 18 years at Olivet Nancy University. I just jumped in at 4 o'clock. What did I miss?
Well, we started with a whole group and then we broke out into breakout rooms.
Okay.
So you came in about halfway through our breakout, and now we're coming back to our whole group to share out our highlights.
Hey, did everybody have fun?
Well, that was cool.
It was pretty cool.
Good. I'm so glad. Do we have, I asked our group, I was in the high school group, to bring one idea to kind of share back, and then we had one idea for a future conversation. I didn't give that direction to other people, so you may not have that, but do you guys have something you'd like to share back from the discussion?
Well, I'll start. The one thing I think that, and I did most of the talking, I'm so sorry to the other people, and we didn't even hear from Alana. I'm sorry. We were trying to talk and I blabbed too long. I know that's hard to believe. The big thing that I think that we talked about is how different my classroom is now, or classrooms are now, versus from the way it was not even too many years ago, where it was teacher-led discussions, or especially in math. You know, we tend to be, I think, we tend to teach as we were taught, and we all were taught is this is a line. You graph a line like this, and you know, you follow me and practice it 2 or 3 times and go home and practice it 50 times. And it's completely different. Now, my kids are talking, my kids are making it their own. They're enjoying math, and I enjoyed math because I'm mathy, and I'm sure all of us did because we're math teachers. We probably enjoyed it. But the poor souls that didn't get it or struggled with math or whatever, and they would come in and never say a word, it wasn't theirs. And the best thing now is it's theirs, and kids want to be in the room. They want to do math. I've got a play table that they come in, and they want to come in before school and create things at my play table. How cool is that? They would have avoided the math classroom and anything else. So the fact that they're talking math and doing math and having success and enjoying it, I think, is the biggest switch.
And in our group, we talked a little bit about how to bring in reluctant learners. Andrew had an idea that I asked him to share.
One of the things you notice at the beginning of the year is you have these kind of quiet kids who they won't participate. They kind of hang back. And so, well, in the process of returning assessments, what I do is I will take certain questions that seem to be problematic for the whole group or the majority of the kids, and I'll re-photocopy those, and I have them work on those to try and sort through where their problems might have been. But then what I do is when I go over a test or quiz, rather than showing my key, I always take, like, I photocopy and take photocopies of student work, problems that students did, and I use those to explain the problems rather than my own work. And I always make a point of trying to highlight, to take those quiet kids when they've done a good job, is to use their work as an example of what's good work. And it seems to like give them a little bit of confidence that this is worthwhile mathematics and that they're doing good work.
Thanks for sharing that. Janine, does somebody in your group want to share something?
Yeah, we didn't establish who was going to do that. I probably should have done that before I hit the button closing all those breakouts. Who from my group can summarize some of our highlights? We had a lot of really good ideas. A lot of my people didn't have a microphone, so it's not super fair. Rebecca, can you share something?
Yeah.
Did you guys have more of a typewritten conversation?
We had some in type. We talked about, I talked a little bit about Joe Bowler's video where I got some of my rules for the classroom about creating a safe space, and put a link in the chat for that. And then we talked a little bit about how do we get kids engaged in math facts in a more positive way, and how we can do games to have that discourse. We talked about how sometimes curriculum really forces us into a box of strategies that either like kids are forced to practice a strategy for way too long and it's frustrating, or that teachers are uncomfortable with a certain strategy and it gets missed. And really we want kids to develop their strategies and be able to verbalize them, but also see strategies that they haven't had a chance to do. And we really have to create opportunities. Janine, say creative insubordination, when we have to sometimes get away from just being directed by the curriculum, so we know what's best for kids, so we have to break those rules. And how do we know when to break those rules and when not to?
And I was talking about like the rules that are established by publishers sometimes that are like pigeonholing students into using a certain strategy that maybe some kids aren't ready for, or that other students have already compressed that process and they don't need to be going back and unpacking it. So just breaking the rules that the worksheet is laying out for them, that's forcing them to use a particular strategy.
Okay. All right, so before we leave today, we'd just like to ask if you have any ideas for future conversations that you'd like to have. If there's anything that you think, hey, this would have worked better if we could have done this, please send a message to Janine and or I directly, or you can put it in the chat. In the forum we have, if you didn't already, I think everybody was here when we already had it, but in the forum you can see, I'll put it in the chat window again. You can see that I tried to put in some of the links from what people were saying. We can also try to connect people if they're interested in connecting with each other. You can let us know and we'll try to connect people directly. And then the only other thing that I was going to say, I'm going to ask people to give their input, is to say that next week our planned discussion is to talk about trying to keep students engaged in May, when students are ready to cut out and we're ready to cut out, like how can we stay motivated? I know my daughter came home with paperwork that said like, what was the best part about first grade? And she still has 14% of her school year left. I'm like, why are we having like and they're sending home things. I'm like, we need to use that 14%. That is too much to just give up. So that's kind of a conversation we're having next week, if you can join us next Thursday. The following Thursday, we're really excited. We're having Dr. Robert Berry, the NCTM president, is going to be joining us. And he is going to talk about his research on Black boys doing math. It's hashtag Black boys do math. And he talks, his doctoral research was on following the successful Black male students rather than always following this, asking what went wrong, instead saying like, what are the things that go right? And so he was speaking at, he spoke at Western Illinois University, if you went to the Western math conference that was there, but he will be joining us. He should be joining us May 17th. We should be sending out an announcement. So anybody, before we leave, are there other ideas or things, wish-fors that you wish you had, that you wish we could talk about at another time?
Guided math.
Guided math. Got it. I'll write it down.
Classroom management.
Thank you.
Inquiry-based learning.
Okay.
Maybe something on low floor, high ceiling, like how to pick really good low floor, high ceiling type things and where to find them. And
Got it.
Heather and I had talked about possibly picking some tasks that then you could take back to your classroom and implement, and then we could come back a week later and share out how it went. So would you guys be interested in doing something like that?
Sure, and that might be fun also for at the end of the year, doing those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that would be good. Although it would now be May 24th. I don't know how many people are still in school. That would be our next one. But. Okay. No, you guys are not. You're counting down the days. Okay. All right. I just want to thank you guys so much. This was our first attempt at this, and I really enjoyed hearing everybody talk, and I hope you guys did too. I hope you'll join us at one of our next two, and feel free, please communicate with Janine and I if there's anything that we can do to help you, or any ideas that you have moving forward for how we can kind of keep teachers connected. One of my goals, my personal goals for Illinois, is for us to raise the retention rate on math teachers, and not because they have to, but because they want to stay in the classroom. So that's kind of one of my goals. So thank you, everyone. We'll sign off, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Jenny just asked how we contact you. I will put our email address in, but if you got the email, to do this, you should have, our email addresses were on there. So if you replied to that, that would be there. And I think those are all the comments. So thanks, guys. Have a good Thursday night.
Linda? Oh.
Was Linda the last one?